One part of the ground in the square was darkened. It looked as if it had gotten wet. It was scattered with corpses. A handful of knights were left barely standing, and the Death Knight stood with perfect posture. Aints counted the surviving knights. They were breathing weakly. It seemed like moving was too much trouble for them. There were 4, more than he needed, but that was fine. That's enough, Death Knight. His voice seemed to boom a bit. It sounded out of place. He spoke nonchalantly, like someone who'd gone to the market and was telling a merchant what they'd like to buy. That was about how Aints registered this situation. Accompanied by Albedo, he touched down gently. The knights, despondent, stood stock still staring at Aints. They'd been hoping for a savior, but instead the worst possible person showed up. This crushed their hopes. How do you do, gentlemen? My name is Aints Ulgaun. No one replied. If you surrender, I'll guarantee your lives. If you still want to fight, then a sword was tossed to the ground. This was followed by the rest, and soon all 4 had been readily cast aside. No one said a word. Well, you all seem quite exhausted, but your heads are held awfully high for being in the presence of this Death Knight's master. The knights silently dropped to one knee and hung their heads not as subjects, but as prisoners awaiting their beheading. I'll send you gentlemen home alive, and I want you to tell your boss your owner Aints glided over to one of the knights using fly. With his free hand, he slipped the kneeling man's close helmet off to look into his groggy eyes. Their eyes met through Aints's mask. Tell him not to cause trouble here. Tell him if you cause any more trouble here, I'll bring death to your country next. The knights nodded over and over, their entire bodies trembling. They were so desperate it was funny. Now flee, and make sure to tell your master. He jerked his chin, and the knights practically fell over themselves as they scrabbled away. Acting takes so much energy, Aints murmured as he watched the knights' silhouettes grow smaller and smaller. If the villagers hadn't been watching, he would have wanted to rotate his shoulders. Acting this dignified part was a huge burden on a normal guy like Aints. It felt just like being inside the great tomb of Nazareth. But the act wasn't over, it was time to put on a different hat. He suppressed a sigh and walked toward the villagers. He knew Albedo was behind him because he could hear the clank of her armor. He mentally ordered the Death Knight to clean up the squire zombies as he walked. As he got closer to the villagers, the mix of horror and confusion on their faces became clearly visible. He eventually realized the reason they weren't upset about him letting the knights go was that a more terrifying monster had arrived. Since he was stronger than the knights, he hadn't thought of things from the point of view of the weak. Aints reconsidered and pondered a bit. If he got too close, it would probably backfire. Aints stopped at a reasonable distance and addressed them in a kind, familiar tone. Okay, you're safe now. I hope you can relax. Who are you? A man seemed to present himself as a representative of the villagers. He spoke without taking his eyes off the Death Knight. I saw that this village was being attacked, so I came to help. Wow, relieved murmurs went around the group, but Aints could tell they were still uneasy. Oh well, I guess I'll change tactics. He took a tack he didn't particularly like. Of course, it's not as if I did it for free. I'd like to get paid some amount times the number of lives I saved. The villagers all looked at one another. Their looks said they weren't sure they could come up with the money, but Aints could see that their skepticism was reduced somewhat. Saving people with the base aim of money made him less suspicious. In this state, I do. Aints cut him off by raising a hand. Let's discuss that later. On my way here I saved a pair of sisters. Give me a little time to bring them here. He would have to ask those 2 to keep quiet. They'd seen him without the mask. Aints headed off at a leisurely pace without waiting for the villagers' reply. He wondered if memory manipulation magic would work. Chapter 4, A Duel. The village headman's house was right off the square. Inside, the floor was dirt. The main room was big enough to serve as a workshop. There was an adjacent kitchen. Some shabby chairs and a table had been set in the middle of the open area. Aints sat in one of the chairs and looked around the room. The light coming through the lattice door banished the darkness to the shadows. He could see fine without night vision. He observed the woman working in the kitchen and noted various agricultural implements. There was no machinery to be seen. He judged that science hadn't advanced very much in this world, but realized immediately how superficial he was being. In a world with magic, how far would science even need to advance? Aints moved his arms, setting them lightly on the table to move them out of the sun. His gauntlets weren't that heavy, but the table was shoddily made, so it rocked and clattered. The chair made a horrible squeaking noise under his weight whenever he moved. These people were impoverished. Aints leaned his staff against the table so it wouldn't be in the way. It sparkled in the light, and especially in this plain room, made it seem like they were in the land of mythology. He simultaneously recalled the villagers' speechless amazement. Their eyes had practically fallen out of their heads. He was bursting with pride that the staff he and his guildmates had made caused such genuine awe. But Aints suppressed that buoyant feeling to the level of faint happiness and furrowed his non-existent brow. He couldn't force himself to enjoy the forced chill out. Granted, it would be difficult to get through this situation feeling giddy. With all of this on his mind, Aints prepared himself to use his brain. They were about to start negotiating the price of the rescue. Of course, Aints' aim was information, not monetary compensation. But just saying, please give me information, would be terribly shady. In a village this small, it probably didn't matter. But if more people, especially those in positions of authority, interacted with him and realized he knew nothing about the world, it could be used against him. Was he being overly cautious? He wondered. This was like trying to cross the street by just running into it. At some point he'd get in a fatal accident. That fatal accident would be a collision with someone stronger than him. Aints was stronger than anyone he'd met in this village, but that didn't mean he'd be stronger than anyone in this world. And he was an undead. He'd gotten a pretty good idea of the standing of undead here from the way the girls had reacted. Humans would revile him, and he stood a good chance of being attacked. He couldn't be too careful. Sorry to keep you waiting. The village headman sat in the seat opposite Aints. His wife stood behind him. The headman was tan with deep wrinkles. He had a brawny physique. It was clear from one look that it had been built by hard labor. Much of his hair had gone white, almost half of his head was white. His cotton clothes were dirty, but he didn't smell. Judging by the look of deep exhaustion on his face, he was probably in his late 40s. It was hard to tell. He seemed to have aged considerably in the past hour or so. His wife was probably around the same age. Aints felt she'd been a trim beauty at one point, but hard work in the fields had worn most of her charm away. Spots had appeared on her face. All that was left was a thin old lady. Her shoulder-length black hair was messy. Although her skin was tan from the sun, she had a gloomy air about her. Here you go. She placed a shabby cup on the table. The reason there wasn't any tea for Albedo was simply because Aints had asked her to check out the village. He refused the steaming water with a raised hand. He wasn't thirsty, and he couldn't take off the mask anyway. After seeing how much work went into it, though, he felt bad for not declining in advance. Making hot water was hard work. First, she had to use a flint to make a spark. Then she had to arrange thinly sliced wood chips to make a fire. From there, she moved it to the earthen oven to build up the flames. It took quite a while to heat the water. In some sense, it was interesting for Aints to see how water was boiled by hand without electricity. He'd never witnessed it before. In the past, in his world, people used to cook with gas or something. He imagined it must have taken about the same amount of labor. I should take this opportunity to learn about their technology too. He turned back to the headman and his wife. I'm sorry I put you to so much trouble. Not at all. No need to bow. They were both flustered at Aints' politeness. They probably never imagined the one who had been ordering the Death Knight around until recently would bow his head to them. For Aints it was nothing strange. It was only natural to behave amicably with the people one was about to negotiate with. Of course, he could always use some magic like charm person to get information from them. Then he could manipulate their memories with an elite spell as he had with the two sisters. But he wanted to save that for a last resort. In any case, it would cost a ton of magic points, or MP. Even now there was a heavy, leaden feeling at his core. Even just to overwrite a couple minutes of memory, to make it seem he had been wearing the mask and gauntlets from the beginning, seemed to have cost quite a lot of MP. It was a serious loss. Well then, shall we skip the formalities and get down to business? Yes, but before that, thank you so much. The headman bowed his head so aggressively Aints thought he would hit the table. A beat later, his wife followed with her thanks and a bow. If you hadn't come, we would have all been killed. We are so grateful. Aints was startled by the depth of their gratitude. I've never been thanked so profusely in my whole life. Well, the two sisters before thanked me the same way, but I guess I had never saved someone's life before, so it makes sense the vestige of Satoru Suzuki, the man he'd once been, was a bit self-conscious in the face of their genuine thanks, but he couldn't say it felt bad. Please raise your heads. As I mentioned before, you don't need to worry about it. I did it expecting something in return. Of course, we understand, but please still allow us to thank you. It's thanks to you that so many of us were saved. Well then, padding my fee a bit will suffice. Shall we begin the negotiations? As headman, you must be very busy. There's no one who deserves my time more than the one who saved our lives. But yes, let's begin. Watching the headman slowly raise his head, Aints got the gears in his brain moving. He had to get the information he required through conversation alone, without relying on magic. What a pain, he thought. I was trained as a businessman, but I wonder how effective my techniques will be. He made up his mind and began to speak, feeling half like whatever would happen would happen. To get right to the point, how much can you offer? We have nothing to hide from you, to whom we are so indebted. I'd have to check to see how much silver and copper we can come up with, but for copper it would probably be about 3,000 pieces. I have no idea how much that is, Aints shouted in his head. He had asked in entirely the wrong way. He ought to have taken a different approach. He'd been a horrible businessman in his former life, so of course his technique was horrible. The number of coins sounded high, but he couldn't just accept without knowing their value. Accepting too low of a sum or overcharging would stand out too much and had to be avoided. He was glad they didn't offer 4 cows or something similar. Just as he was about to get depressed, his mood stabilized. Thankful for his undead body, he consoled himself by considering that he'd learned at least one thing: silver and copper pieces were the currency circulated in villages. He wanted to know what other denominations there were, but he wasn't confident he could lead the conversation in that direction. The bigger issue was the monetary value of a copper piece. He would run into a lot of trouble from here on out if he didn't know it. Not knowing the value of the currency would make him stick out way too much. He wanted to stay unnoticed as much as possible while he was still learning about the world, so he furiously thought, even just to avoid more mistakes, carrying so much small change would be a burden. Would it be possible to make it more compact? My apologies. If I could, I'd like to pay you in gold pieces, but we don't really use them in this village. Aints suppressed a relieved sigh. This was the chance he'd been looking for. Now he just had to think how to take it. He felt like his head might start steaming from the effort. Then how about this? I'll buy some of this village's goods at a reasonable price, and then you can pay me with the coins I give you. Aints surreptitiously opened his item box beneath his robe and picked up 2 of Yggdrasil's gold coins. One featured the relief of a woman's profile, and the other, a man's. The former currency came into use after the huge update, the fall of Valkyria. The latter was the old kind. Monetarily, they were both the same value, but he was more attached to one of them. The old currency had been with him since he'd started playing. They used it when they formed Aints Ul Gaun, and they used it for most of the time the guild existed. When the update was released, the guild was in its heyday. He'd already collected pretty much all of the gear he wanted. So he'd been just throwing the new coins into his item box. He remembered the handful of coins that appeared in the air the first time he'd gone hunting as a skeleton mage. He remembered the mountain of coins he got when he snuck into a dungeon solo. He'd frantically fought off all the active mobs that attacked him. He remembered the golden sparkle when he sold data crystals acquired in a successful raid with the guild. He dismissed the nostalgia, but put away the old coin and took out the new one. If I wanted to shop with this, about how much would it be worth? It's a coin from a far-off, truly distant country. Can I not use it here? I think you can. One moment, please. Feeling relieved to hear as much, he watched as the headman stood up and brought something over from the back of the room. Aints had seen one once in a history book, a money changer's scale. From then on, it was the headman's wife's job. She first held the gold coin up to a disc-shaped object, seeming to compare sizes. Once she was satisfied with those results, she placed it on one side of the balance and put a weight on the other side. He had the feeling she said something about currency by weight. Aints rummaged around in his memory to guess the significance of what she was doing. First, she must have compared it to this country's currency for size, and now she must be checking it for content. His gold coin was lower than the weight. She added another weight to balance them out. It's as heavy as about 2 of our gold coins. Do you mind if I make a slight scratch on the surface? Ah, don't be rude, my most humble apologies. My wife has been most, it doesn't bother me. You can destroy it if you like, but if the inside turns out to be solid gold, then you'll have to buy it from me. No, I'm sorry. The headman's wife bowed and returned the coin. Don't worry about it. It's a matter of course when considering a deal with someone. So what do you think about that gold piece? That relief is gorgeous, right? A work of art. Yes, it's quite beautiful. What country is it from? It's from a country that no longer exists. Oh, I see, so it's worth 2 of yours, but considering the artistic value, I would think it could be appraised a bit more highly. How about it? That may be, however, we aren't merchants, so it's difficult for us to assess artistic value, ha ha ha. Indeed, I see. So then if I shop with this coin, it will be worth 2 of those, all right. Oh, of course. Very well. I have several of these coins, so I wonder what amount of goods you'll be able to sell. Of course, I will pay a fair price. You can charge me the same as you charge anyone in the village. Please take your time in investigating the matter. Lord Aints Ul Gown. The suddenness of the headman's voice practically gave Aints's non-existent heart palpitations. His earnest expression was firmer and more striking than before. Aints is fine, Lord Aints. He seemed puzzled for a moment, but then quickly nodded a few times before continuing. I understand just what you mean, Aints. Aints imagined a big question mark popping up over his head. He had a feeling there was some kind of misunderstanding, but since he had no idea what the headman was talking about, he couldn't say anything. I know you don't wish to be seen as cheap. And for your reputation, you'd like to reach a compromise. It must cost a fortune to hire someone as strong as you, Lord Aints. That's why you want some material goods, in addition to the 3,000 copper pieces. Aints was completely confused by the headman's proposal. He was glad he was wearing a mask. He had presented the gold coin and asked how much he could buy with it to get a general idea of what things cost in this world. How did things end up going in this direction? He didn't interrupt, so the headman continued. However, all we can afford to offer is 3,000 copper pieces. It's only natural that you would doubt us, but we have nothing to hide from you, our savior. The headman's expression was brimming with sincerity. There was not the faintest suggestion that he might be lying. If I get tricked here, I've got only my inability to judge character to blame. And of course, I don't expect that someone as powerful as you would be satisfied with the paltry sum our small village can offer. If we went around the village collecting, perhaps we could scrape up something more adequate, but we've lost a lot of workers. If we pay more than the amount I mentioned, we won't be able to make it through the next season. And that goes for goods as well. Since we've lost hands, there will be fields that don't get tended. I predict extreme hardship for us in the near future if we give up produce now. I'm ashamed to ask this of you who have just saved our lives, but would you at least be willing to split everything with us? Oh, is this my chance? Aints felt as if he'd walked out of a dense forest to find a panoramic view. He pretended to be deep in thought. He could see where he wanted to go. He just prayed he would get there. After waiting a few moments, he replied, I understand. I don't require any compensation. What? Why not? The village headman and his wife's eyes widened in surprise. Aints raised a hand to signal he was going to continue talking. He guided the conversation, thinking what information he should give them and what he should keep to himself. It was a pain, and he wasn't certain he could pull it off, but he had to. I'm a caster, and until recently I had been holed up in a place called Nazarick to research magic. Ah, I see, so that's why you're dressed like that, huh? Ah, well yes, he mumbled, fingering the jealousy mask. If casters dress so bizarrely here, he wondered what the cities looked like. Bali's Barong and Rangda walking down the street came to mind. He'd begun to hope this wasn't such a shocking world when he realized something strange. The word caster made sense to them. In Yggdrasil, the word caster had a broad meaning. It lumped the countless magic user classes: priests, clerics, druids, arcaners, sorcerers, wizards, bards, Miko, talisman wielders, mountain hermits, and others all together. What a coincidence if it were the same here. I don't need compensation, but ain't stopped here to judge their reaction. A caster makes use of various things: fear, knowledge. You could call these the tools of our trade, but as I mentioned, I've been holed up doing magic research, so I don't have much current knowledge of this area. I'd like to get some information from the 2 of you, and then have your understanding that no one is to know you sold it to me. Let's do that instead of monetary or material goods as compensation. There's no such thing as a free lunch, So the saying goes. Of course, he would ask for something. Anyone in negotiations with someone who just saved their lives and who said they didn't need anything in return would probably feel like something was fishy, so he had to make it seem to them like they'd compensated him, even if that compensation were intangible. In other words, if he could convince them that selling him information he needed was a fair trade, they wouldn't get suspicious. And in fact, both the headman and his wife nodded intensely. You have our understanding.